Rick Grenell is joining us now, Senior Advisor for National Security and Foreign Policy. And Rick, I want to start with politics with you because you're all over the country in states. You're at the rallies, you're on the ground, and we are seeing a trend. It's at the right time towards Republican candidates. And but there's also some new races popping up. For instance, Utah, which is now being discussed. People weren't paying a lot of attention to Democrat Evan McMullin, who tries to claim to be a Republican. It's gone very far left in the last few years. And Mike Lee. So while we've got some races that are getting more solidly Republican, others that are popping up, it's 21 days out. People are already starting to go to the polls. What are you sensing on the ground when you're out there at the rallies, when you're with the candidates on the ground talking to voters?
Well, I've been in Nevada and Arizona the last week, and now tomorrow I go to Utah to help Mike Lee. Yep. And Thursday and Friday I'll be with Ron Johnson in Milwaukee. Look, I think that the economy is the number one issue. And, we can talk about the border and public safety, and those are important issues. But every single person right now is talking about the economy, and they know that the gas prices are the direct result of Joe Biden cutting production. People know this is a national security issue as well. It's not just an economic issue. When you cut production, American production, and we no longer are energy independent, then we have problems in the Middle East with our foreign policy, and we have problems at home at the gas pump with the price of oil.
Yeah, so when you're in the States, I me'ean, we're seeing a lot out west, but you're going to be traveling more to the Midwest with Ron Johnson. These are all the races that we're talking about, and you've still got the leftists of the media trying to smear every one of these candidates in their own way, and everybody's uniquely being smeared. But that is seems to be a little bit of a sign of desperation now that people are going to be voting. A lot of early voting starts this week. But the people on the ground, I mean, the economic issues, like you said, that's number one. We know that when that becomes number one, they trust Republican people, voters who are not necessarily aligned with the party, trust Republicans more to deal with economic issues. And I think, if are starting to get the picture that it's not just about the House, but if you get the House and the Senate, you can put a stop to a lot of the bad policies and also force more negotiation from the Biden administration. And that's what we're really voting on in this midterm, is getting back to having a seat at the table on a lot of these issues.
It's such a great point on being able to use a little bit of the leverage by winning the House and the Senate, because not only do you stop, but you begin to have a seat at the table, as you say. And that's exactly what the country needs. They need to be able to have the people who want to have lower gas prices because they emphasize production. They need to have a seat at the table. So I think that you will see a very big change if Republicans take over the House, and an enormous change if they take over the House and the Senate. And remember, one thing that will be very interesting is that if the Republicans take over the House, that means the Democratic caucus becomes smaller. A whole bunch of Democrats have lost. And I would argue that that means the moderates are going to get lost. The Democratic caucus is going to get even far more left. Their voices will be Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and that is only going to help the march towards 2024 in the White House.
But I want to get to some foreign policy. I do think, because the economic issues are all impacted by what's going on around the world as well, and you know that from your years of experience dealing with what's going on around the world. First to China, just your reaction to now. You've got Chairman Xi. He's got this very unique third term because they changed the laws, much like they did in Russia, to allow Putin to continue to serve. They've done the same thing in China. And now that he is, I think, re-emboldened, and he's kind of selling to the world, Rick, and I know you know this, but this idea, just for our listeners, that, see, you can rely, we have reliable governments, whether it's the way that they run in China or the Russians or the Iranians, and the U.S. with all your crazy elections and your every 2 years, you can't rely on this part. That won't work in the new world. And that's his message to the world is, we are the leaders of the world. We're the new leaders of the world because our leadership is stable, and you know what you're going to get with us.
That message that China always pushes, which is consistency and stability. You can go and plan your foreign policy with us for 10 to 15 years because we don't have elections, actually works with some countries because they like long-term planning and they don't like the instability. It certainly doesn't work with the people. right? The people are not getting as many freedoms. But one thing to note is that Xi has had to try to dial back some of the big plans that he's wanted to have. He's had to win this next term. It's been a difficult conversation inside the Communist Party regime. The team there was a little bit skeptical, and so he had to win people over. Now that he has won them over and he gets this next term, I think you're going to see an unleashed Xi.
When you say unleashed, you're talking military action, Taiwan, those kind of issues?
I think just a big, bold Chinese foreign policy and big, bold decisions. I'm not sure what that is actually going to mean for them, but I think that they will not be hesitant like they have been.
Yeah, I wanted to then turn to Iran because one of the places I know, as you served as DNI, but also as ambassador to Germany, and we've had clients in Evin prison, and the protests have even gotten to the point where there's fire in Evin prison. There are protesters there. Obviously, it was put down. People were killed. This is one of the worst prisons in the world. A lot of political prisoners, people who are outspoken, and that's where they get thrown into to be tortured and disappear. And you never know. For people that we've talked to, have been in prison there, and we've represented, they never know each day what day they could be called out and executed. And that's the kind of, and it's also just like a third world prison, out of control, crammed with people. And so the protest breaks out. You seen any sign from this administration they're going to do anything different than what the Obama administration did during the Green Revolution?
I don't. And the one thing to note about Evin prison is that all of the political refugees, the people who have gone up against the regime, are there. So it's filled with people who are democracy seekers, people who have challenged the system. And if you have a fire there and you have a whole bunch of people killed, you're wiping out all of the activists against the regime. So this is extremely concerning. I saw that President Obama was regretting the fact that he sat on the sidelines during 2009, during the Green Revolution. That obviously is a very big deal. It was the Obama-Biden team that sat on the sidelines. I hope that means that Biden is going to do something. We see now these reports of the Iranians supplying drones to Ukraine at the same time that Joe Biden is trying to negotiate with the Iranians. It's fair to say that Biden is now on both sides of the Ukraine war.
Yeah, I mean, so they're using these drones. What we've seen happen in Kiev has been these Iranian, they call them kamikaze drones that go right into the buildings. And that's, so, the Russians are buying them from them, and then they're being used against our equipment inside Ukraine. Like you said, that is an issue that just continues to be more and more complicated. We've had the threat of the nuclear issue, but I think it all goes back to this. When you talk about all these issues, and they're real, and people are getting hurt, it has that direct impact on all of us in the pocketbook, and people, the uncertainty right now in the financial markets, in decision making. It's really difficult on people. I hope, Rick, what you're seeing is that people will vote that way. That say, you know what, this is not acceptable from my government. They need to be do better, and we need to hold them more accountable. And the Republicans will also have that investigative power if they get into both. Again, they'll have it if they get the House, but if you get the House and the Senate, that investigative power gets that much stronger.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think people need to understand right now that the Biden administration has spent $19 billion of U.S. taxpayer money in Ukraine, while at the same time negotiating with Iran to give Iran billions of dollars, while Iran is sending drones to Russia. We are on both sides of this issue. We are spending billions of dollars on both sides. It's outrageous, and we actually need to hold the Biden team to account and have some investigations of this money and a little more scrutiny about pushing diplomacy rather than just war. I think if you vote for Republicans and you get a House and the Senate, you're going to get that scrutiny. You're going to get that pushback. You're probably going to save money.
Yeah, and you know what? It's been a shift, and we've seen it. We saw it kind of went more rapid under your service when you were at the Trump administration, this shift to say, let's put a halt on just rushing into conflict all the time. And yet when we get with Democrats, we feel like we're right on the edge of so many different conflicts. As always, we appreciate, Rick, your insight.